They say your whole world changes the moment you become a mother. Mine did too, but not for the reasons I expected. Because the moment my husband Marcus looked at our newborn son for the first time, he didn't cry or smile or even reach for him. He just stared, and said, "We need a DNA test immediately." The room fell dead silent. Then, with the most casual smirk, he added, "He's too good looking to be mine." It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. I sat there in my hospital bed, holding our newborn, Liam, just hours after labor, and for a second I couldn't breathe. My arms tightened instinctively around him. His skin was still soft and slightly pink, his tiny fingers curled into a fist near his cheek. He made a little cooing noise, unaware of the silence that followed his father's words. At first I laughed. Because what else do you do when the man you've been married to for 4 years says something so absurd? But no one else really joined in. One of the nurses chuckled awkwardly, more out of discomfort than amusement. My mom, who'd been scrolling through her phone near the window, suddenly stiffened. "Marcus," I said, trying to keep my voice light, "what are you even talking about?" He didn't laugh. He just stood there, arms crossed, looking at Liam like he was trying to solve a puzzle. His eyes narrowed slightly, and that stupid smirk never left his face. "I'm just saying," he shrugged. "Those eyes? That hair? That little chin dimple? I mean, come on, there's no way he got all the good genes." I felt my cheeks flush, not from the compliment, but from the implication. My chest tightened, like a rope slowly pulling tighter around my lungs. I tried to laugh again, but it came out thin. "So what, you're serious? You actually want a test?" Marcus walked closer to the bed and leaned down to look at Liam. "Just to be sure," he said, like we were talking about checking the oil in a car, not questioning the paternity of our newborn son. I felt a slow burn crawl up my neck. My hands trembled as I shifted Liam in my arms, cradling him closer to my chest. His warmth was the only thing grounding me in that moment. From the corner of my eye, I saw my mom rise from her chair, arms folded tightly across her chest. Her mouth was pressed into a thin line. She didn't say a word, but I knew exactly what she was thinking. She never trusted Marcus, not fully, and maybe, in that moment, I didn't either. I looked at my husband, the man who held my hand through every appointment, who painted the nursery pale green and told me we'd name our son after his grandfather, and I saw someone else, someone cold, detached, suspicious. "Covering all the bases," he said again with a shrug, like it was no big deal. But it was a big deal, because suddenly everything felt different. The room, the joy, even Liam's soft breathing, it was all undercut by this shadow he had cast. Why did his words hurt so much? Wasn't I enough? Didn't he trust me? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew one thing. The moment should have been beautiful, and instead it was the beginning of something I never saw coming. After Marcus made that comment, everything shifted. Not just in the room, but inside me. You'd think after giving birth, your only thoughts would be about the baby. Counting fingers and toes, memorizing their little size, falling in love over and over every time they blink. But instead, I couldn't stop thinking about him, Marcus, and what he said. We were discharged 2 days later. My mom insisted on staying with us for a while, to help. But I knew she didn't trust Marcus alone with me. I told her she was being dramatic. She didn't argue. She just gave me that look, tight-lipped, eyes soft with concern. Marcus, on the other hand, acted like everything was normal. He didn't bring up the DNA test again, not once. He changed diapers, made jokes, even took selfies with Liam for Instagram, writing captions like, "Already got my mini-me." I tried to let it go, to convince myself it had been a stupid joke, said at the worst possible moment. But something inside me had started to ache. A quiet, gnawing kind of ache, the kind you can't point to but you feel in your bones. It wasn't just the comment. It was how he looked at Liam sometimes, like he was trying to figure him out. I caught him one night standing over the crib just staring. He didn't notice I was watching. His brow was furrowed, eyes squinting a little like he was searching for something he couldn't quite find. When I stepped into the room, he jolted slightly and laughed it off. "Just wondering when he's going to start looking like me," he said. I smiled, but something about his tone made my skin prickle. Then little things started happening. things I might have ignored if I wasn't already on edge. A nurse from the hospital, Rachel, I think her name was, called one afternoon saying they were doing a routine follow-up. Her voice was polite, but I swear I caught a strange hesitation when she asked for Liam's hospital ID number. I gave it to her, and she paused for a beat before saying everything was fine. I asked her if something was wrong. She said no, but the way she said it didn't sit right. Later that night, I went through Liam's hospital papers and noticed something weird. The wristband they'd clipped on him at birth, one of the numbers was off from mine. Just one digit. A typo, maybe. But once you start doubting, you can't stop. I Googled newborn ID errors for hours. I fell down a rabbit hole I never meant to find. I finally showed Marcus. "Are you serious right now?" he said, laughing. "You were the one mad at me for even suggesting something was off, and now you're acting like the baby might not be ours." I opened my mouth to argue, but he kept going. "Sophie, you're tired. You just had a baby. Your hormones are all over the place. Don't let this get in your head." He kissed my forehead and walked away, leaving me standing there with a handful of medical papers and a head full of doubt. Maybe he was right. But if everything was fine, why couldn't I shake the feeling that something wasn't? I started checking things obsessively: his birth certificate, the bracelet, old ultrasound records, photos. I became someone I didn't recognize, a mother with a newborn in one arm and a browser history full of worst-case scenarios in the other. I didn't want to believe Marcus was serious about the test, but now, deep down, I wasn't so sure he was wrong to ask, and that terrified me. It was a few days later when Marcus brought it up again. He didn't do it during a fight or even with a hint of anger. He just said it casually, over coffee, like he was mentioning a dentist appointment. "So, I found a private clinic that does same-day DNA testing," he said, taking a sip from his mug. "Discreet, reliable." I blinked at him, unsure if I'd heard correctly. "You're still on that?" He looked up. His eyes were calm, but too calm. Controlled. "I think it'll just give us both peace of mind." Both? I didn't answer right away. I stared down at Liam, who was curled up on my chest, his tiny lips twitching in a dream. He was so peaceful, so perfect. The idea that anyone would question him, even his own father, felt like an insult. But at the same time, I had been questioning things too, hadn't I? The wrong ID number, the nurse's weird tone, the way Marcus stared at him in the dark like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "I thought you said you were joking," I whispered, still staring at Liam. Marcus shrugged. "Half joking, but seriously, Soph, wouldn't it help you too? You've been acting different, anxious." He wasn't wrong, but something in his tone felt off, not concerned, strategic, like he already had a narrative and was waiting for me to catch up. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept watching Marcus out of the corner of my eye. Not because I thought he'd hurt Liam, but because I realized I didn't really know him anymore, or maybe I never did. The next morning, I called the hospital. I told them I had a few questions about Liam's birth records. The woman I spoke to transferred me to someone else and then someone else again. Finally, I was put through to a hospital administrator named Ellen, who seemed cautious. "Everything looks fine on our end," she said after a pause. "Healthy baby boy born at 3:42 a.m., no complications." "But his bracelet didn't match mine," I said. "Just one digit off." "That can happen," she replied quickly. Too quickly. "We've updated our labeling system since then." Before I could ask more, she cut me off. "You should speak to patient records if you want printed documentation." Click. I sat there for a long time with the phone still in my hand. It was like everyone wanted this to disappear, like if they ignored it long enough, it would. That same day, I went digging through Marcus's old stuff, his documents, high school yearbooks, anything I could find. I told myself I was just curious, but deep down, I was looking for something to either confirm my fear or erase it. But there were gaps. No baby photos, no childhood mementos, just a few adult IDs and his college diploma, which I realized didn't even list a middle name. I'd never noticed that before, or maybe I never questioned it. When I asked him about it later, he laughed. "Fire burned all that stuff when I was a kid, remember? I told you that." Had he? I couldn't remember. Every little inconsistency suddenly felt like a thread, and once you start pulling, it's hard to stop. Still, I agreed to the DNA test, not because I believed Liam wasn't ours, but because I needed proof. Not of Liam's identity, but of Marcus's. I didn't say that out loud, of course. I just nodded and said, "Okay." And the minute I did, Marcus exhaled, relieved. That was the moment I realized. He wasn't afraid of what we might find out. He was afraid I'd stop asking. The DNA test was scheduled for Thursday. Marcus handled everything, called the clinic, filled out the forms, even drove us there like it was some normal family errand. He was calm, too calm. Meanwhile, I felt like my chest was lined with barbed wire, tightening every time I looked at him. Liam was in his car seat in the back, blinking up at the ceiling, kicking his tiny socks off again. He was the only one in the car who seemed at peace. I envied him. We dropped off the samples, mine, Marcus's, Liam's, and were told we'd get results in 5 business days. Marcus joked on the way out, something like, "Bet he's 80% angel, 20% trouble," but I barely heard him. My thoughts were already spiraling. 5 days to sit in this limbo, knowing my husband thought our son might not be his, and knowing I didn't really know who he was anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid in bed pretending to scroll my phone while Marcus dozed off beside me. But my mind wouldn't quiet down. His fire story about losing childhood mementos kept looping through my head. It felt rehearsed, convenient. Why couldn't I remember him ever telling it before? The next morning, I dropped Liam off with my mom and went back to the hospital on my own. I told them I'd left behind a small blanket with Liam's name embroidered on it. Total lie. But it got me past the front desk and into maternity. The moment I saw Nurse Rachel, the one who had looked uneasy after the birth, I felt a jolt of hope and dread. She recognized me immediately. "Sophie, right?" she said, offering a soft smile. "How's the little guy?" "Good," I said. "But I have a weird question." I told her about the mismatched bracelet, the wrong digit, the follow-up call. I expected her to brush it off, but instead her face went pale. I shouldn't say anything, she said, glancing around. But that night, we did flag a potential mismatch, just for a moment. Something in the system glitched and showed 2 babies under your ID number, but it was cleared. Management said it was a system error and told us to move on. I felt the blood drain from my face. Was Liam ever taken out of the room without me? I asked. Rachel hesitated. For a routine check, yes, but only briefly. How long is briefly? She didn't answer. I thanked her, numb, and left the hospital in a fog. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. My throat was dry. The words, 2 babies under your ID, echoed in my head like a siren. I couldn't tell Marcus what I'd learned. Not yet. I needed more. So I started digging. Social media, online archives, anything I could find about Marcus's past. I even searched public record databases, which I'd never thought I'd do in my life. It was like I had become a detective in my own marriage. But the more I looked, the more the details blurred. No trace of his high school graduation, no tagged photos before 2012, and oddly, I couldn't find a single person online who shared a memory of him before college, not even a childhood friend. It was like Marcus had been born at 21. I stared at a blank profile photo from an old college alumni page and felt my stomach twist. I had agreed to a DNA test to prove Liam was ours, but now I wasn't sure what scared me more. The possibility that our son wasn't his, or the growing fear that Marcus wasn't who he claimed to be at all. The call came early on a Wednesday morning. I was standing in the kitchen, rocking Liam in one arm, still in my pajamas, when my phone rang. The screen just said, "Unknown number." I almost didn't answer. Something in me froze, but I picked up. "Mrs. Evans?" A calm, clipped voice said, "This is Dr. Graham from Greenbrook Medical. We need you and your husband to come in today to discuss the results of your paternity test, in person." "In person?" I asked, my throat going dry. "Yes, it's urgent." My stomach dropped. I couldn't even speak. I just nodded as if he could see me. Marcus didn't ask questions when I told him. He just said, "Finally," and grabbed his keys. The drive to the clinic was quiet. Liam was asleep in his car seat again, completely unaware of the storm swirling around him. I stared out the window, heart pounding, trying to steady my breathing. At the clinic, a nurse led us to a small private office. It was cold inside, sterile, like they'd sucked the warmth out on purpose. A digital clock on the wall ticked loudly, every second hammering against my nerves. Then Dr. Graham walked in. He was middle-aged, graying at the temples, with a no-nonsense air about him. He sat across from us, opened a file, and paused, long enough that I felt my chest physically tighten. "I'm going to be direct," he said. "The results came back, and they are highly unusual." I clutched Liam tighter, suddenly aware of how warm and real he felt in my arms, my anchor. Dr. Graham looked at me first. "Sophie, biologically, this child is not related to Marcus." I didn't even blink. Somewhere inside, I already knew that. But then he turned to Marcus. His eyes lingered for a second too long. Something passed across his face. Hesitation. Maybe even fear. "And Marcus," he continued, voice quieter now, "you are not a biological match for this child. But more importantly, your DNA doesn't match any records associated with the ID you submitted." Marcus went still. I looked over at him, expecting confusion, denial, something. But his face didn't move. Not even a twitch. Dr. Graham closed the folder. We ran a cross-check through our internal system. Your name, your date of birth, even your photo, all of it triggered a federal alert. I felt my blood run cold. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Graham didn't answer. He picked up the phone on his desk, pressed a button, and said one sentence I'll never forget. "Security. We need you in room 4 immediately." Time stopped. I turned slowly toward Marcus, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw it. The tiniest flicker in his eyes. Panic, but just for a second. Then it was gone. "What the hell is going on?" I breathed. Marcus stood. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "You think I'm some kind of, con artist?" But Dr. Graham didn't flinch. "We don't think. We know. Your DNA matched a man named David Langston. Arrested in 2014. Disappeared shortly after posting bail. The real Marcus Evans died in a car accident the following year. We're not sure how long you've been living under his name." I couldn't breathe. The room spun. The man I married, the father of my child, the man I thought I loved, wasn't even real. As 2 uniformed guards entered the room, David, looked at me. Not with guilt, not with regret, but with sadness. Like maybe, for a moment, he'd actually wanted to be someone else. And just like that, they took him away. Out of my life. Out of Liam's. Out of the lie we were living. I didn't cry right away. Not when they handcuffed him. Not when the door slammed behind him. Not even when Dr. Graham handed me the printed DNA results like some final confirmation that none of this had been a dream. I just sat there, numb, holding Liam close to my chest, his tiny head resting under my chin like he was the only real thing left in the world. The days after felt like walking through water. Everything slowed down. Everything felt heavy. Reporters tried to reach out once the story hit local news. A man living under a stolen identity, posing as a husband, a father. They called it a bizarre paternity case with a criminal twist. I hated that phrase. This wasn't a story. This was my life. It turned out David, Marcus, whatever his real name even was, had been switching identities for years, avoiding debt, legal charges, even rumors of fraud in another state. He wasn't a violent man. At least not physically, but the betrayal cut deeper than any bruise ever could. What kind of person fakes their entire life just to be with someone? And worse, what kind of person becomes a father in the middle of that lie? For a while, I couldn't stop blaming myself. I went through every memory with him, every birthday, every laugh, every "I love you," trying to find the cracks, the clues, the signs I missed. But the truth is, people like him, they're good at pretending, good at becoming exactly who you need them to be. But here's what shook me the most. Liam was mine. I had feared the worst. that he'd been switched, that I'd somehow gone home with the wrong baby. But after the investigation, the hospital confirmed what Nurse Rachel had tried to tell me. There had been a system glitch, a mix-up, but it was corrected before we were discharged. Liam never left my side long enough to be taken. He was mine from the moment he took his first breath. And yet, in some twisted way, David had used that glitch to his advantage. He fed the doubt, leaned into the confusion, made me question everything so I wouldn't start questioning him. Clever, cruel, calculated. It took me weeks to say his name out loud, even longer to stop calling him Marcus in my own thoughts. Now it's just me and Liam. We moved back in with my mom for a while, Angela, who never once said, "I told you so." She just held me when I finally let myself cry, and she holds Liam like he's the whole world because to me, he is. I filed for annulment. There were no legal complications, surprisingly. You can't stay married to someone who never existed. Sometimes I still get mail addressed to Marcus. I toss it in the trash without opening it. And other times, late at night when Liam's asleep and the house is quiet, I think about the man I thought I loved. The version of him that sat with me at 3 a.m. feedings, who painted the nursery pale green, who kissed my forehead before every doctor's appointment. Was that real? Or was that just part of the lie too? I don't know. Maybe I never will. But I do know this. Sometimes, the truth doesn't just hurt, it rips the ground out from under you. It forces you to rebuild everything from scratch, to figure out who you are without the person you thought would be by your side. And in that messy, painful rebuilding, you find something stronger. You find yourself. And in my case, I found Liam. And that's more than enough. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever found yourself questioning everything, your relationships, your reality, even your own instincts, just know you're not alone. Sometimes the hardest truths lead us to the strongest versions of ourselves. If this story moved you, made you feel something, or reminded you to trust your gut, please give it a like, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real, raw, and powerful stories like this one. Your support means more than you know, and who knows, maybe the next story you hear will be the one you needed most. Until next time, take care of your heart and trust it too. They say some moments never leave you, like a scar your mind can't stop tracing. That day, my brother's engagement, I became the scar no one wanted to see. I remember the cold sting of the air conditioner, despite the room being packed wall to wall with guests. Laughter buzzed in the background, the clinking of glasses, the shutter clicks of phone cameras. But to me, it all felt distant, muffled, like I was underwater. My hands trembled as I smoothed down the crease in my dress for the 10th time. Navy blue, long sleeves, nothing flashy, just safe, just invisible. Anya, my daughter, held my hand tight. She was bouncing with excitement, tugging at me every few seconds to point out the cake or the lights or the huge heart-shaped decoration behind the stage. I smiled, but my stomach was a knot. Kian, my younger brother, stood on stage beside Layla, his fiancée. He looked radiant, beaming, sharp in a cream sherwani, the family's pride. And Layla, she was gorgeous, like always. But her eyes, cold, they scanned the crowd like a queen sizing up her subjects, and when they landed on me, something in her expression shifted, tightened, as if I was a bug she'd just noticed under her shoe. Then it happened. Layla leaned in, whispered something to my mother. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw it. My mother's face didn't flinch. She nodded. That same curt nod she used to give when she made a decision about me without me. Then my mother turned. Her heels clicked against the marble as she made her way through the crowd. She didn't smile. She never did. Not for me. She stopped just inches away and leaned in. "Zoya," she said, her voice low, almost kind, which somehow made it worse. "Stay away from the stage, please. Layla doesn't want any bad luck near her today." Bad luck? That word pierced through me like ice. For a moment, I genuinely thought I misheard her. My mind scrambled for a better explanation. A joke? A misunderstanding? But her eyes were still, her lips pressed into a flat line. She meant every syllable. I blinked. "What?" "She's right," my mother added. "You've always had unfortunate timing." Let's not ruin today." My throat went dry. The room seemed to slow, as if time itself paused to see what I'd do. Around us, the laughter continued, the celebration unbothered. But I felt the heat of eyes turning, some pretending not to hear, others pretending not to care. I felt like I was shrinking. Why did it still hurt this much? After all these years, I should have been used to it by now. The silent blame for my father's accident, the way my failed marriage was whispered about at family dinners, even my miscarriages, each one met with the same tight-lipped silence, like it was contagious. I glanced at Kian. His eyes met mine, just for a second, and then darted away. That flicker of guilt, it cut deeper than any insult ever could. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My tongue felt like it was glued to the roof of my mouth. I just nodded slightly, stepped back, and squeezed Anya's hand a little tighter. "Why can't we go up there, Mama?" she asked, her voice full of innocence. I crouched beside her, trying to keep my voice from breaking. Because sometimes people don't understand what's special. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing the way she does when something doesn't make sense. She looked toward Layla, then at me. And in that tiny pause, something shifted in her expression, like she saw something she'd never seen before. And that's when I should have known. Anya wasn't going to stay silent. I wasn't always the unlucky one, you know. There was a time, brief, blurry, when I was just Zoya, a quiet girl with big dreams and a louder laugh. But somewhere along the line, the world stopped seeing me, or worse, started seeing only what they wanted to see. I was 8 when my father died, a freak accident, head-on collision, rainy night, coming home from work. I remember my mother's scream. I remember the neighbors standing outside in silence. I remember clinging to Kian, who was only 4, while everything else in my life shattered like glass around us. That was the first time I heard the word bad luck whispered behind my back. One of my aunties muttered it. He doted on her so much, spoiled her. Maybe it was fate. My mother didn't correct her. After that, I started noticing things, how my mother's warmth dimmed around me, how she looked at me with that same distant politeness she used on strangers, and how she lit up around Kian, her perfect son, the hope that survived the wreckage. I didn't resent him for it. Kian was sweet. He always tried to include me, especially when we were younger. But as we grew up, things shifted. He became the center, the protector, the pride. I was just the shadow. I married young, mostly to escape. He was kind at first, but after our second miscarriage, he changed. And after the third, he left. Quietly. No drama, just a text that said, "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." I stared at that message until the screen went dark. When Anya was born, she was a miracle I didn't expect. A stubborn, squalling, perfect baby girl who made me feel, just for a moment, that maybe I wasn't broken after all. The doctors had told me I wouldn't carry to term, but she proved them wrong. And of course, my mother's reaction? Cold. "I hope she doesn't grow up with your luck," she said, barely holding her for more than 5 seconds. I laughed it off, but inside, it stung. It always did. Now here we were, all these years later, back under one roof, my brother's engagement. I told myself I'd just go, smile, keep to myself. No drama, just support. But the moment we walked into that venue, I felt it. The distance. The looks. The way people greeted me with that overly sweet voice they use when they're uncomfortable. Like pity was perfume they sprayed before walking over. Uncle Rehan, my mother's older brother, gave me a warm smile when we arrived. "Zoya, you look radiant," he said kindly, pulling me into a side hug, one of the few people who never treated me like a burden. Still, I stayed on the edges of the crowd, watching, listening, trying to stay small. Anya tugged on my hand constantly, wanting to explore. "Can I go near the cake, Mama? Just to look?" I nodded, trailing behind her. She ran ahead, twirling in her little blue dress. She was light, pure light. The only part of me untouched by bitterness. I should have known it wouldn't last, because just an hour later, I'd be standing like a statue as my mother and Layla made it painfully clear. I wasn't welcome on that stage, not even as a sister, not even as a guest. And in that moment, something cracked. Not loud, not public, just a quiet snap inside me. The kind that doesn't scream. It aches. I didn't know it yet, but something else was shifting too. Not in me, in Anya. And what happened next would silence the entire room. The stage was glowing under rows of fairy lights, gold and white, delicate, dreamy. Everything had been crafted to perfection. Even the petals on the floor seemed to know where to fall. I stood near the back of the hall, pretending to admire the decor. I wasn't really seeing anything, just hearing the faint echoes of what my mother had said. Layla doesn't want bad luck near her today. The words looped in my mind like a cruel nursery rhyme. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, arms crossed tight against my stomach. My palms were clammy. My heart hadn't stopped racing since she said it. Anya was now sitting on the edge of a chair beside me, swinging her legs and humming quietly to herself, completely unaware of what had just unfolded. Part of me wanted to just leave, but something stopped me. Maybe pride, maybe pain, maybe the fact that this was my brother's big day, and even if I was invisible to him, I still wanted to see him happy. The MC's voice cut through the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are moments away from the ring ceremony. Family, please gather toward the stage." Guests began moving, forming a semicircle. I instinctively took a step forward with the others. Then I saw it. Layla caught my movement. Her eyes locked onto mine with that same sharpness. Then a slow smirk. She leaned in, whispering something to Kian. He didn't look at me, just nodded, jaw clenched. That smile of hers, it wasn't just about the stage. It was a victory. Like she'd won something. I stopped, right where I was, frozen in that moment. I felt like I was 8 again, hiding behind the sofa while adults decided my fate. "Why aren't we going?" Anya asked, standing and tugging at my sleeve. I crouched beside her, trying to keep my voice steady. "We'll watch from here, sweetheart." She frowned, confused. "But everyone's going, even the cousins." I swallowed hard. Sometimes we don't get to go where others do, and that's okay. It wasn't okay, not even a little. The guests gathered closer. Phones came out, flashes popped. My mother stood proudly by Layla's side. She didn't even glance my way. Uncle Rehan lingered near the front row, looking back at me briefly, his eyes soft with something like apology, but he said nothing. Maybe he didn't know what to say, or maybe, like everyone else, he thought silence was safer. I didn't cry. I wouldn't give them that. But inside, I was unraveling. Why was I always the one they could ignore? Why did no one ever speak up for me? Why did Kian look the other way, like I was something shameful to be hidden? I was his sister. I helped raise him when our dad died. I stayed up with him through exam stress, heartbreaks, nightmares, and now I wasn't even good enough to stand beside him on the happiest day of his life. My fingers dug into my palm so tightly I left crescent marks. I told myself to just breathe, just wait it out, let it pass. But Anya wasn't done. She climbed up onto her chair, staring hard at the stage. Then she whispered, "Mama, that lady is mean." I blinked, startled. "Anya, shh, don't say that." Her face was scrunched, thoughtful. "She said you bring bad luck, but you don't." And then, without warning, she hopped off the chair and started walking toward the front. I reached out, too slow. "Anya, wait!" But she was already halfway there, her little dress swishing behind her. I had no idea what she was about to do, but in that moment I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a flicker of fear and of hope. I stood there, frozen. The hem of Anya's dress disappeared between 2 rows of chairs as she marched her tiny body toward the front. My heart dropped to my stomach. For a second, the air felt thick, too heavy to breathe. I broke out of my daze and pushed through the crowd, whispering apologies as I tried not to draw attention. But eyes were already turning, heads tilting, murmurs starting. Anya reached the front of the stage. She wasn't rushing or hiding. She stood tall, well, as tall as a 7-year-old can, looking up at the people towering around her. Kian, Layla, my mother, all staring down like she didn't belong there. I wanted to run, to scoop her up, to disappear before she said something that would make things worse. But then, she did something I never saw coming. She walked right up to the microphone. My breath caught in my throat. "Anya!" I hissed under my breath. Too late, too far. Layla's hand shot out like she might stop her, but hesitated. Kian looked confused. My mother's face dropped, her mouth parting slightly. And then it happened. Anya gripped the mic with both hands, looked up at the sea of faces staring down at her, and said in the clearest voice, "Can I say something about the bride?" The room went still. Like movie scene still. Every table, every mouthful, every phone mid-photo. Layla blinked, her expression faltering for the first time all evening. Maybe now's not..." But Anya kept going, eyes locked ahead. "My name is Anya. I'm 7, and I want to talk about what I heard Auntie Layla say." My legs felt weak. I could barely stand. "Please don't, baby. Please." She wasn't trembling. She wasn't even nervous. She looked calm, serious, like she'd rehearsed this in her dreams. "She said my mama brings bad luck," she continued, her voice unwavering. "But that's not true. My mama is the best person I know." I couldn't move. "She takes care of me all by herself. She made me chicken soup when I was sick and read me stories when I had nightmares. She doesn't yell. She just hugs. She says love should be kind and quiet." Someone near me gasped. I don't know who. Anya looked straight at Layla now. "And you were mean. You didn't say it nicely. You didn't even look sorry." Layla's expression cracked, eyebrows raised, mouth stiff. I glanced at Kian. He wasn't blinking, just watching Anya like he'd never seen her before. "And you also said something else," Anya added, her voice dipping lower. "You said you didn't even like my Uncle Kian, that he was just a good match." A sharp inhale cut through the crowd like a knife. I saw someone lower their phone, eyes wide. Layla's cheeks flushed. She stepped forward quickly. "That's enough. She's a child." But no one moved, not even the MC. And suddenly, all that noise I used to fear, the whispers, the judgment, the pity, it vanished. The silence felt different now, charged. Because Anya hadn't just defended me. She'd challenged them. This little girl with her ribboned braids and tiny voice had pulled the thread holding their perfect image together, and the fabric was starting to unravel. I still couldn't believe it. My heart was pounding, my hands were trembling again, but not from fear this time, from something else, pride. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to apologize for existing. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. The silence was about to shatter. Amazing. You're on fire for keeping the story rolling like this. It felt like the world had stopped spinning. Anya stepped away from the microphone and stood in the center of that glittering stage, this tiny, defiant figure in a sea of adults. Some stunned, others shifting uncomfortably in their chairs. No one spoke. The MC had lowered his mic. The photographer, bless him, had stopped clicking. I think even the chandelier lights felt dimmer. I was rooted to the spot, breath held tight in my chest. All I could do was watch. Layla looked like someone had just slapped her. Her lips parted, eyes wide, face draining of color. She glanced at Kian as if expecting him to laugh it off or take control, but he didn't. He just stood there, mouth closed, shoulders rigid. His gaze flicked from Anya to Layla, and then, slowly, to me. And in that moment, something passed between us. He saw me, not as the burden, not as the shadow in the family photos, but as his sister, as Anya's mother, as someone who had been hurting, silently, for years. And maybe he saw how much it took not to crumble every time they blamed me for things I didn't cause. Then I saw my mother. Her arms were crossed, her face carefully blank, but her eyes gave her away. That tightness around the edges, that telltale twitch in her brow. She wasn't in control anymore. Uncle Rehan stood near the front and he did something I didn't expect. He clapped, just once, but it echoed. And then he stepped up, slowly walked toward the stage and put his hand gently on Anya's shoulder. He bent down and whispered something. I couldn't hear it, but Anya nodded and smiled faintly, her tiny hand slipping into his. He turned to Layla next. "I think the girls said what many of us were too polite to," he said quietly but clearly. "Maybe it's time we stop pretending kindness is optional." The words landed like a stone in water. Layla looked mortified, her jaw clenched. This is ridiculous. She's a child. Children exaggerate. But Uncle Rayhan didn't back down. Children speak truths adults are too afraid to face. Kian exhaled, long, slow. His voice was quiet when he spoke. Did you really say that? About Zoya? Layla stiffened. It was a private conversation. You said it. His voice cracked, just barely. She didn't answer. He shook his head slowly. I can't do this, Layla. Not like this. My mother gasped, stepping forward. Kian, don't be impulsive. He looked at her, and his expression, God, I'll never forget it. I've been impulsive my whole life, he said, by staying quiet when I should have defended her. My knees gave a little. I grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. He turned to me then. Zoya, I'm sorry. It was just 2 words, but after a lifetime of silence, they thundered in my chest. Layla stepped back, her face hardening. You're making a mistake. Kian shook his head. Number, I think I've been making them for years. He took off the engagement ring from his own finger, the one he was supposed to present, and gently set it on the stage beside Layla. The room was stunned, and then he walked over to me. He didn't say anything, just pulled me into a hug, tight, like he was trying to make up for every year he hadn't stood between me and the pain. And when he let go, he crouched down and pulled Anya into his arms too. I'm proud of you, he whispered to her. She grinned, that gap-toothed smile lighting up the room, and just like that, the silence shattered, but this time it wasn't cruel. It was freeing. The next day, I woke up to a text from Kian. I hope you know how proud I am of you, of Anya. I'm sorry it took me this long. I read it twice, then once more for good measure. My chest felt tight, not in a painful way this time, but in that strange, quiet way. Healing begins. Like a wound realizing it's safe enough to start closing. It wasn't about the apology, really. It was about being seen. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible to my own family. I wasn't just the backdrop to someone else's celebration. Later that week, Kian came to visit. Just him. No Layla, no crowd. He brought pastries from my favorite bakery. Something small, something thoughtful. We sat in the living room, Anya playing with her dolls on the floor while we talked. I should have stood up for you a long time ago, he said. I didn't realize how deep it went. Until Anya said it out loud. I gave him a sad smile. She has more courage at 7 than I had at 27. He shook his head. She has your courage. She just didn't learn how to hide it yet. That hit something deep. I didn't cry, though I came close. Instead, I looked at my daughter, so bright, so full of light, and I realized something I hadn't dared to believe before. Maybe I wasn't cursed. Maybe I was just different, and different scared people. A few days later, Uncle Rayhan stopped by too. He brought me a potted jasmine plant, white blooms just beginning to open. Something that grows quiet but strong, he said, just like you. Even my mother. Well, she hasn't said much, but she called. That alone was a miracle. She didn't apologize, not directly, but she asked if I was doing okay, if Anya needed anything. It wasn't much, but it was something, and in our family, something was progress. Anya, of course, doesn't fully grasp what she did. She just wanted to tell the truth, to stand up for her mom, to write something she knew instinctively was wrong. Mama, she said one night while brushing her teeth, are you proud of me? I knelt beside her, looked into those wide brown eyes and whispered, more than you'll ever know. She grinned, then added, so, I'm good luck? I laughed. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, really laughed. That kind that bubbles up from your chest and makes your eyes crinkle. You, I said, pulling her into a hug, are the luckiest thing that's ever happened to me. And it's true. Because here's what I've learned. Sometimes, the people who carry the most pain also carry the deepest love. We move through life quiet, afraid to take up space, to disrupt, to be too much. But we are not too much. We are just enough for the people willing to see us fully. Anya taught me that it's okay to speak up, that defending yourself isn't disrespectful, that love, real love, shows up, even if it takes a little longer than you hoped. So no, I'm not unlucky. I am unbreakable. And if being unbreakable made people uncomfortable, if it made them whisper or stare or look the other way, then let them. Because from now on, I will not shrink myself to fit in someone else's idea of acceptable. And thanks to one brave little girl, I will never again believe that love has to come with silence. It turns out, I was never the one bringing bad luck. I was the one breaking the cycle. And that's the luckiest thing of all.